Recording, and you'll hear recording in progress. Hello everybody. Andrew Petersen is my name. I'm the CEO of the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia, what it says on the side of the tin. And welcome to this month's Exchange. Exchange is literally what it's all about. An exchange of ideas, topics, themes, conversations, issues, resources, toolkits, whatever is going on in the world. We like to think that we're distilling it, funneling it, and bringing it to you, the members of BCSD Australia. But we also invite invited guests into our little community as well to have a chat. So in today's session, I'm going to be walking through just a couple of highlights from particularly this morning's, what am I saying? This morning's Insider, because there's an awful lot to unpack in it, and it took me an awful long time to put together. But more importantly, there's things that we'd like to highlight for you as members to be alive to. And in that regard, one of them is a new service or feature that we have inside Insider, which we encourage you to be able to access, which uses that dreaded thing called AI. Dun, dun, dun. But the beauty for you is it's our AI, not anybody else's. So you're safe if you use our AI. Yeah. It's trust me, I'm a doctor kind of thing. Yeah. So in opening, I acknowledge that I'm broadcasting to you from the land of the Camaragal people and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. After the quick intro, though, we're going to hear from a very learned person in the recruiting industry who has recently put out a report on the status of the industry and what insights are coming down the pike in relation to that sexy area of ESG. Although I guess in one sense it was incredibly sexy 2 years ago, is it as sexy anymore? And can one command those high price dollars that everybody was expecting in this particular market? And so we're very excited that Simon Gvalda from Kaizen Recruitment has joined us to talk about that, and we'll be doing so in a very short while. But first, let me go to Insider. And for those of you in the membership and your membership category who get this, this came this morning replete with a lot of new intel. Most importantly, a request for you to have a look at a news segment that we want to include on what's the state of the sustainability market, because we think that it's time for us to play a role in telling you about this as well. You may get this information from other sources, but we've been able to curate a particular platform to be able to give us this information literally minutes before you get it. And so we actually have the means by which to put this together and send it to you in Insider every Monday morning. But we want to know if you think it's of any value. And so if you get a chance, please click on and tell me yes or no, because then I will get a reply very quickly, and that will help us then determine whether or not we pursue this and put it into the body of our information for you every Monday morning. In terms of engagement, don't forget, Marianne Gruber and Zued are still championing the GRI through workshops, and they are still available for registration, are they not, Marianne?
Yes, they are. And the next series of workshops will be held online, actually. So you can dial in from wherever you are in July. So starting July the 8th. So in about 3 weeks' time, we start. What's also really important to note, though, if you are interested in pursuing this kind of education, sorry, I'm just going to get this out of the way, Andrew, is that this will be the last part of the GRI professional certification program that will include the Sustainable Development Goals training. So after that, you'll still be able to do that training on the GRI Academy, but not with, amazing facilitated training. And after this lot of July sessions, the GRI professional certification pathway will actually change a little bit with some other offerings which the GRI has not yet publicly announced. Yeah,
Let's
but get right in. It's looking like a good cohort.
stay tuned.
Yeah.
Excellent. This was also to highlight that this week is the start of the Group of Seven, the so-called where Albanese meets Trump. And we have already started to track what its significance, if any of it, means to Australia, and particularly the Sustainable Development Agenda, because there's much on that agenda. In fact, I was reading this morning a headline that said, "We hope this is going to be a really boring G7 and Donald Trump has to leave really early," which I thought was a very bizarre way of suggesting that a group of seven meetings, which includes the US, wouldn't actually have Trump in the room for terribly long. But after the success of his military parade, he probably is bathing in glory that he wants to return to America. Because this one's being held in Canada, the 52nd state of the United States. But no, we are tracking, and stay tuned for our report next week about what the outcomes were. Thank you for registering, for the 10 of you who have registered. In fact, there was about 50 who'd registered and haven't turned up as yet, but we are recording this, and the recording will be available back through Insider later next Monday for you to review if you have missed this, although you're here, so you're not missing anything. But if you want to also register for the subsequent events of Exchange every month, just go ahead and click register. Also, coming up this week is the UNFCCC's COP30 Subsidiary Bodies 62, which is the 62nd meeting of the subsidiary bodies, which is an important midterm. Where are we up to after the negotiations that were held in Baku in Azerbaijan at COP29, and obviously what's going to happen at COP30. We've already started to track, and you can click as a member and go into that information, but we'll have an updated report following the conclusion of it. So that is the 26th of June, which then correlates to our, coming down here, COP30 business briefings navigating the road to Belém on the 30th of June. So for those of you who dialed in on this last Thursday, wasn't it Wednesday or Thursday, Marianne? Apologies. I moved it because I thought it was a bit silly to have this webinar before the subsidiary body meeting. So my bad. But anyway, also coming up, and big shout out to Lisa McLean at Circular Australia, because she sent this to me, is the hosting of an online event by the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Water, and Energy and Environment and Water. One day I'll get Deku right. And Standards Australia on a consultation workshop that's happening this Wednesday. It is free for everybody to attend. It is online, and I've given you the link to that if you wish to attend. If you know of others that would be interested, by all means, send it on. I mean, this is what we do in our community. We share these sorts of things and then get everybody to be alert to it. Welcome you to send it through to others who may be interested in attending. Also on the 18th of June, we're hosting a very interesting launch in Australia of the work by the WBCSD and Valans out of Europe in relation to what they call trade associations as a force for good. We've renamed it slightly because we don't necessarily associate trade associations in the same, the terminology, we call them business and industry associations. But it's going to be a very interesting session around this playbook that's been developed in collaboration between Valans and WBCSD, with commentary by the Influence Map, which is a well-known think tank and initiative that looks at and tests the credibility of individual organisations, both corporates but also associations, in relation to, in this case, their climate change performance. And so really would encourage you to think about coming. It will be recorded so that we will provide a record of it in the next Insider next week. But if you are very interested in understanding companies that are using this process of review of their engagement with their associations and understanding where the alignment or misalignment exists in relation to industry associations' positions on things like net zero, then it's something very much worth coming and having a listen to. Then on the 20th is the actual survey that follows on from this work that Standards Australia and DECU are doing. Then the week after next, we're looking at what's happening in London Climate Week. Already started to track that. A lot of really interesting intel that's going to be launched, including the Business Breakthrough Barometer that WBCSD with its global network has been doing. That's due to be released, I think, on the 26th of June. No, 23rd of June. And so we will be bringing that to you once it's available. I've already seen it, but I can't share it because it's under embargo. But I'm guaranteeing you, Australia's in there. We made absolutely sure there was clear reference to the work of those sectors that were in transition, that were emissions intensive and trade exposed, and therefore they needed a foci in the report. And we're quietly excited that the report will reflect that. A number of you will be aware that we have in the past had internal briefings on policy. We're now going to make them public, but they're for your benefit. And so this new platform called Landscape is now launched, and you can register, and it will be an hourly conversation with a lot of experts on the three key pillars of nature, climate, and equity. And so we're looking forward to you joining us. It will be in a webinar format, not in a meeting format, but that's because we're presenting to rather than necessarily seeking individual member feedback from, because that will continue in the process that we have at the moment, which is to reach out to you directly via email with our suggested consultation process and submissions to each and every matter, which we'll get to in a minute. Don't forget also, if you haven't registered for the COP30 business briefing, it's a public webinar. More than delighted for you to register as well. All right, now, very quickly, don't forget BCSD Australia News was put out this morning, as was ESG Snapshot, and hopefully you have already received that. We've done an analysis of the Prime Minister's address to the National Press Club. There were some really interesting points in relation to productivity and how that he hopes, as the Prime Minister said, will tackle growth, wage growth, and streamline infrastructure approvals. And you see that in the work of the Productivity Commission, who've also been looking at this as well, to which we have, on your behalf and with your input, provided a submission, particularly in relation to streamlining environmental approvals. There were some also important updates in relation to the Plastics Treaty, because 90 countries, including Australia, have endorsed what's called the nice wake-up call. What a lovely way of putting it, for an ambitious global plastics treaty. And this is going to be, or I think it has been the Kickstarter for the final round of negotiations under INC 5, which are due to happen in August under INC 5.2. Don't ask why we do this, but these negotiations have been kick-started because of this commitment. And Australia's right in there. Murray Watt, our minister, Environment Minister, made a clear statement in relation to the commitment of Australia to higher ambition in relation to the Plastics Treaty. Now, that's going to be very interesting to observe, given America's position now and potentially other countries that perhaps are not going to be as aligned in relation to the intent of that. The next and second last, I was privileged to go to a DFAT and Queensland Investment and Trade briefing on the CPTPP. And if you don't know the acronym, tough, because I can never remember what it stands for, but it is the Combined Trade, I always forget what the Combined Partnership Trade Partner, whatever. Basically, it's the regional trade partnership for the Pacific. And Australia is this year the chair of the partnership. And so it was an interesting insight into what Australia's priorities are in relation to the partnership, which include not just increasing trade, surprise, surprise, or facilitating access, but making it more inclusive. And there was actually a pre-briefing for Indigenous business communities from across the Pacific that was held before this symposium. And there's going to be some interesting, important new language going into the partnership agreement on the role of Indigenous business and the non-tariff barriers that have previously existed, like in relation to IP, that are creating barriers for the ability of Indigenous business across the Pacific to be able to find new markets for their products, for their graphics, for their logos, for their designs, for their ideas, and for them to not be taken advantage of. And so it's a really interesting program of work that has been launched by the Australian government as part of its commitment as the chair. But there's also a whole section in there around sustainable development, which includes environmental and labour standards, of which we, after the symposium, were invited to a further roundtable briefing on that coming up in the not too distant future. And I think the other big news was the Oceans Conference, which was held in Nice, in France. This is not held on a regular basis. This is held on a needs basis, but this was an interesting one because Australia, apart from Australia attending, made interventions at the conference, and one of those goes to a direct consultation intervention we made in relation to the high seas beyond borders. I always forget what the N and J stand for. Treaty. And so we're waiting to see if the treaty itself comes into legal force by the number of country parties that will sign up to it. Australia already has, but they need a threshold number for it to actually come into full force and effect. And it will then have some significant implications for tourism, for trade, for shipping, for aquaculture, and even land-sea interface. So if you have business operations, you should think seriously about looking into the treaty and the obligations that Australia has made a commitment to. And if you need information as to what we have made submissions in relation to, let me know, and I can send that to you in a direct way. All right, then, there's just an updated report in relation to other matters. I've given you an update on the negotiations in anticipation of the Bond conference this week. And interestingly, there was a shout out to some further work that's going on under the UNCCD, which is the United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. And this is going through a review process later in the year in anticipation of its COP next year. And it really does hit on things that are incredibly relevant to Australia. Most people don't realise that Australia is a party to this. We became a party about 5-6 years ago, I think. And it is the COP around drought. It is the COP around desertification. It is the COP around land degradation. That's not necessarily dealt with by the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. So that the conversations around resilience on landform, landscapes is all dealt with in this particular pillar of the conventions. And so we've started to track it because we think that there's going to be some important inputs that need to be made. The WBCSD has for a number of years been a party to this and is in fact the business/private sector interface with the UNCCD process over the last couple of years. I've already reached out and had a couple of you indicate that you are interested in keeping up to date with this, and we will do so on a fairly regular basis. All right. Now, quickly, the thing I wanted to share with you, though, is this Consult Watch. We have now created the mechanism by which you can find out what's going on in terms of consultation processes across the Australian federal landscape, the OECD, the UNCBD, the UNFCCC. We're trying to do the UNCCD, and that's slightly harder. But not all this is, but this is a service for you to be able to go and have a look at what we track on your behalf, and then we come and talk to you about consultation process. So all you need to do is click on the particular link, and it will take you to the current open consultations under the following areas: Parliament, Department of Climate Change, Ag, Industry, Science and Resources, Treasury, Infrastructure, ASIC, APRA, ASICS. We're still trying to do a couple of others, and they're slightly more complicated, but these are the ones, and these are just a straight record or grab of information that is put on by these agencies and government departments around the state of consultation that they are doing on a variety of topics. And then we make our judgment call about which ones we then come and talk to you about, the ones that we play a role in. But there are others here that may be of relevance directly to you and your business. And so you may be interested. And the thing is just to dial in every Monday morning when you get inside to have a look at, because it's updated every Monday in the algorithm. And so it's a helpful prompt for me, but we thought that we would open it up to the members to be able to use as well. And so, as I said, that wasn't just Australia. OECD, I don't think OECD's got anything going on at the moment, if I remember correctly. I think they were quiet. UNCBD is an interesting one. They have a lot going on at the moment, particularly around the thematic of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And we're just siphoning which ones we think are of most business relevance as distinct from broader civil society relevance. And so we'll come back to you with inputs in relation to that. But as you can see, they are updated every single week. And as the date falls due, it then falls off. And it just keeps going in terms of the information that is available there for you to have a look at. And if you're really tragic, then the UNFCCC ones are arguably the weirdest ones to look at, because you can't actually tell what they're asking you to do. So they've got 2 calls out at the moment. They do tell you what they've done in the past, which is very helpful. And the really surprising thing is that in the case of the UNCBD, in the case of the UNFCCC, anybody can put a submission in. It doesn't have to be just from a party. You do have to be an observer. And that is the reason why we're interested, because we are, along with our good colleagues, Evan, at the UN Global Compact, we are a registered authorised observer, and therefore we can make submissions in relation to any particular topic that they've called for submissions on through that particular process. So I just wanted to call that out, because I don't think too many people, it's certainly our algorithm tells us that I seem to be the only one having a look at it, but we wanted to be alert to the fact that we are using it, and you can use it too. Are there any questions in relation to any of that? Any observations?
It's a great resource, Andrew.
Thanks, Marianne. We should put GRI on that one.
Should put GRI on that one.
I was thinking about that one. Yeah.
There is a lot that's happening with the GRI.
Evan, does Global Compact put out calls for submissions, or do they respond to other UN agencies' submissions?
We are thoroughly in the response position.
Right. Okay. No, it's fascinating. Once you start to gather it, you go, oh my God, Gvalda, where do people get the time to actually respond to most of this? It's exhausting. Yeah. So hopefully we think you will find it of interest and relevance. All right, let's pivot now to Simon. I don't know why I did that, but Simon, welcome. Already introduced you. And in that regard, let's kick off by going through our pre-prepared set of questions, which we've, I was going to say prepared earlier, which is hence it's pre-prepared. But it would be helpful to know, for you to let us know to start off with, because I suspect not everybody knows on this call, and I didn't before I saw the article in FS Sustainability. Tell us a little bit about you and what Kaizen Recruitment actually does.
Well, thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here, and thanks for everyone for having me today. So I'm a manager at Kaizen Recruitment. We're a specialist financial services recruitment agency, and I recruit across the ESG and sustainability roles across all levels. I've been recruiting for over 5 years now. Prior to moving into recruitment, I spent almost 10 years within the financial planning industry, which gave me a lot of insights into how things operate. At Kaizen, we have a significant database of talent from which we draw. Around 80% of our placements come from our database. I really enjoy recruiting across the ESG space. ESG professionals I know are very passionate about the area they work in and creating a lot of great positive change. So it's just been great to be able to play a small part in the bigger picture of connecting people with job opportunities out there.
Very good. So, what led to the creation of this particular report, which is, quote, the ESG and Responsible Investment Salary Report?
Yeah.
And to that, what do you hope it contributes to the sector?
Yeah, well, this is actually the fifth year we've put together and created and released this report to the market. Um, I think what we're really trying to achieve is just bringing transparency to salaries, bonus structures across the industry. It is fairly focused on the financial services space, but a lot of the skill sets and that we have do go broader than that. Obviously, the ESG industry is an incredibly important space, and those who work in it, I feel, should definitely be recognized and suitably rewarded for what they do. And through this salary guide, we're hoping to bring greater focus to the industry to help those who are passionate about creating positive change to understand, what they're worth and what skills out there are in demand at the moment. So yeah.
Okay, so let's drill into some key insights from the report itself. You say the report says it reflects that ESG salaries are said to have plateaued. What do you think's driving that particular shift, and what does it tell us about the current state of the market in Australia?
Yeah, well, I guess over the last 5 years, ESG salaries have risen quite
Hmm.
significantly in response to higher demand. However, as you said, our latest salary survey shows that this growth has now plateaued. I believe a lot of this is due to an increase in supply of candidates with ESG expertise, particularly coupled with the pullback in demand from employers, leading to a bit more of a balanced market at this stage. The way I would describe the current market is flat as such. So what I mean by that is there's not a whole lot of new roles being created, but businesses are still replacing positions when employees leave. So it's not all doom and gloom. And with the results of the recent Australian federal election, we're starting to see early signs of, I guess, what I'm calling green shoots that may be more favorable to a landscape for the industry, leading to a more favorable landscape for the industry going forward. And don't want to get political in any sense, but while the jobs market has leveled off compared to more recent years, the long-term demand definitely remains underpinned by regulatory drivers and the
Mm,
recognition of ESG risks that the risks that ESG issues pose if they're left unaddressed, for the longer term.
yeah. I mean, we saw, for those of you who are old enough to remember, um, 2007, 8, the Great Recession, that saw a what? A significant diminution of companies hiring in relation to this space. And then, of course, when the Abbott government repealed the CPM, we saw another wave of yeah, sackings in relation to professionals in the carbon space. So it's interesting you say that it's plateaued, it hasn't dipped, and what's the driver for that, which we then go to this demand being still reasonably strong, especially with the rollout of the ASRS, and the rise of these new roles more broadly within business. So, what are employees asking for now?
Yeah, no, great question. As you mentioned, sort of with the rollout of the new ASRS reporting standards, we've definitely seen a steady flow of roles into the ESG consulting space. So as businesses are grappling with the need to implement capability to comply with the rollout of the new mandatory climate reporting requirements, that has been an area of focus. However, I do believe over time this will transition to greater demand for in-house roles as businesses look to reduce consulting spend it's expensive once they have the systems and processes established and in place. Typically, your typical ESG role is generally very broad and generally multifaceted as well. Most employers are looking for people that have experience across multiple different areas. So employers are generally looking for a mix of not only passion for ESG issues, but that combined with strong technical capability. For an example, like depending on the size of the team, senior roles could have a focus on strategy, reporting, team leadership, but also in addition to that, require knowledge of areas such as human rights, natural capital, biodiversity, governance, the list goes on. No one person can be a deep expert across all areas of ESG, and therefore people need to decide whether they remain high level sort of generalist across different areas, or whether you want to develop and more specific technical capability in a particular niche, such as biodiversity or human rights, for example. So there's a lot of opportunity to move in different ways, but depends on which direction you're looking to go.
Well, it was reported when the tech sector was shedding, I think 18 or 24 months ago, that those technicians were actually moving into the ESG space. And this is before the return of the Trump administration to 2.0. But the reason for that is because data was becoming so critical in either reporting or, more importantly, in gathering information to better inform companies around the ESG requirements that were either being expected by the investor community or were being expected by platforms like Global Reporting Initiative and others. What are you seeing, or what have you reported are the standout capabilities or experiences that are actually getting traction? Is it just data, or is it, you talked about biodiversity, for example, but in that regard, what quals or experience are being looked at?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm definitely seeing professionals from across a range of ESG type sectors coming into the space. For example, I've seen candidates with, as you kind of mentioned, like environmental engineering backgrounds, bringing their technical capability to roles such as like private equity firms, where those firms will invest directly into like physical assets such as energy infrastructure or new green building projects. So they're able to bring that technical expertise of carbon and water and waste and the like to these roles to be able to develop out the capability that a lot of people within the finance sector may not have that level of, again, knowledge and depth within. Definitely candidates from like other backgrounds such as like, well, I was saying engineering, but also like law and accounting, or even the science backgrounds. People can definitely leverage that experience within industry to bring a different perspective. However, particularly in the case of financial services, I've found that further upskilling is generally required just to understand the intricacies and know, like, be able to read a balance sheet or read a, annual report, that sort of thing. There's a lot more technical capability that is required. So building on not only the ESG side, but also the, investment or, like business piece. And from our recent salary survey, the top skills in demand across financial services at the moment are particularly the ESG integration side, reporting, which is quite obvious with the new standards, due diligence, and a strategy focus. But as you mentioned, there's also emerging skill sets such as particularly the data analysis piece and carbon accounting, which very much lead into the reporting side of what's happening across the market. And given the current focus on ESG reporting, there's currently numerous reporting standards, as you mentioned, that are being used across the industry. It's obviously reflecting diverse needs and priorities of the various stakeholders. But according to our survey respondents, currently the UNPRI, the UN SDGs, and IFRS or IFRS S1 and S2 are the most commonly used reporting standards, probably because they mostly reflect a broad scope. Others that are used, to say, in the property sector, such as GRES, Green Star, Neighbours, etc., also definitely there. But there's also environmental factors that are definitely remaining the key focus, I think, for businesses at the moment, given the time critical, but also more measurable nature of the issues when it's compared to like social and governance factors. Most professionals we speak with have a broad scope and experience across multiple areas. mainly just due to how complex and intertwined, ESG issues are, as I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with.
Okay. Let's look at senior management and board. What are they telling you particularly when it comes to recruitment? Are they saying that ESG is moving up in their agenda, therefore they need more intel, more quals sitting inside their business, or is it starting to stall, given the earlier comment about plateauing?
Yeah, like within the financial services industry, ESG roles have obviously risen to greater prominence over the recent years. Generally, we'll be reporting through to like C-suite, like such as like chief investment officers or potentially the CEO in some cases. Have been seeing the boards asking for more like reporting to effectively make those longer term decisions regarding risks and opportunity that the company faces. Many businesses have built out their senior ESG capability in the last few years, and they have switched their attention to developing mid and more junior level roles to sort of assist with the day-to-day volumes of work. And this allows more senior managers to focus a bit more on the strategy side. But as you're saying, unfortunately, things have, I feel, stalled slightly with the current geopolitical landscape. The focus of many Australian organizations has shifted partially away from like ESG to other business priorities at the moment. However, that being said, ESG does represent, in my mind, good risk management. And to stay competitive and profitable, companies will need to include ESG in the leadership agenda to proactively identify and mitigate those risks that otherwise are going to cause potentially costly problems in the future. So it's more of a long-term focus, but I know unfortunately businesses do have that quite short term, 3 to 5 year time frames they work on when we're kind of looking at more, 50, 100 years, which makes it a bit more difficult, particularly on the climate side, I would suggest.
They might argue it's 3 to 5 months, not 3 to 5 years.
Well, yeah, at the
But
moment.
all right, final question, and it is taking your point about forecasting, particularly for those who have dialed in. What's your advice as they look to build or strengthen their capability over the next 12 to 18 months? What should they be looking for or positioning themselves to if they are looking to move?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll talk a bit more broadly about it. From like our salary survey, career development and salary continue to be the leading motivators for when people are considering a role change. And other factors that people are considering are leadership team, culture, and flexible working arrangements. If you understand the key motivations for employees, it's then that is crucial to be able to attract and maintain the best talent at the moment. So I know people are probably identifying with some of these factors that they are reasons why they would want to stay or move from their current role. But in order to build and strengthen the ESG capability across teams, I generally recommend looking internally first, who has a passion and aptitude to learn, develop into the ESG space. It can be a great opportunity to recognize and reward employees with that career growth opportunity, which then comes back to what people are looking for. And if you realize that you may then need further resourcing because it's not available internally, you can know that there's obviously great people out there looking to jump into this space. Um, Businesses and ESG professionals are both incredibly busy. And where I think it comes down to is it's very difficult for candidates to find the time to go out there and seek new opportunities, especially at that more senior level. And also for business leaders at the same time to step away from the other pressing priorities that they're working on to then sit down, look through CVs, manage a recruitment process. It does take a lot of time and effort. And I guess we're essentially working to give back time to people and to bridge that gap between the top talent that's out there and the potential employers. So I find even though the industry is experiencing some hurdles in that front, I'm quite optimistic around where ESG and sustainability roles are going, and recruitment is heading in this space going forward. But yeah,
Not going anywhere. They're just maturing up.
exactly.
All right. Anybody on the line have a question for Simon? Yeah, everybody is still on mute.
I have a
No.
question, Simon. Sorry. As I said before, I used to work in Peru, and in Peru, a lot of people in sustainability are communication majors, or me, I'm a poli-sci major, and I realized in Australia it's a little bit more about the hard skills. Um, Are there any kind of skills that you guys are always looking for, something that will make your resume stand out, in terms of courses maybe, or kind of classes, especially if you don't have that hard skills background?
Every role, what I find in ESG and sustainability roles more generally, every role is quite different and can be quite specific to the industry, underlying industry. So it really depends on which way you're looking to go with your career. Is there a particular, like I said, area you're looking to specialize in or that, or are you wanting to, be across the environmental, social, or governance side in a way? There's definitely, I can't say for certain that there's one skill that if you had that, like that, to have in ESG, because there's so much changing in the space all the time currently that it's not, what's relevant now could in 6 to 12 months time not be as in demand or as relevant. Like I mentioned, data skills are probably going to be very critical going forward as that further develop out the ESG reporting and capability. That can be a very good technical skill to pick up that is not only useful for just ESG, but just broader, business related skill sets and that. So that's probably if I was going to say one skill set to really delve into, it's probably the data piece, would be a good way to sort of set yourself up in a good way for the future. But hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
That's interesting. And in wrapping up, I would like to, David Nicholas, could you provide me with the details of the intern meeting? Yes, of course I will, David. Separate conversation. There's an interesting observation I would make that in the last 18 hours, the head of Renault Group in France, Luca De Meo, has announced that he is resigning from Renault and going over to be the CEO of Kering. And you would look at that and think, well, that's interesting, going from the auto sector to the luxury brand sector. How is that in any way relevant? Because it's data. It is all about data. And in his case, it was data in relation to carbon. He's moving into carbon, he's moving into nature, and he's moving into the challenge of the social impact in relation to that particular industry. And he called that out in the interview, that you might look at it and think, well, he's going into two different industries, but he saw that there was relevance in the underlying challenges that companies now face around climate, nature, and equity, and that he had a skill set because of the strategic intent that he's put into Renault that had a reference to the work that Kering does, albeit in a totally different sector, but the challenges in relation to data aggregation and therefore measure and management were exactly the same. And so I would like to think we're going to see something very similar, that the market is going to value those professionals, particularly in the senior suites, that understand that particular thread. And that's spoke for and paid for by Andrew Petersen on behalf of the Andrew Petersen Party. So I am conscious of time because we like to finish before the hour. Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, please, in the usual way, please thank Simon for his contribution. That can be an actual clap or a virtual clap.
Thanks, Simon. That was great.
And I think Simon's put the link to the report into the chat function, which you can access. And with that, let me thank you all very much for joining us. Don't forget, if you want to rewatch, it will be available in a recording in Insider. And look forward to seeing you next month and sometime in the future. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.